John and I used to be almost identical. Same age, same ordinary background, same office job, same starting salary of $1,500 a month. We even carried nearly the same amount of debt after graduation, about $10,000 each. Neither of us was exceptionally intelligent. Neither of us came from a wealthy family. Neither of us inherited money. Neither of us had access to some secret investment formula. But 20 years later, John was still living paycheck to paycheck. He still had credit card debt. He was still terrified that one bad month or one job loss could destroy everything. I, on the other hand, had built a portfolio worth more than $1 million. When people saw the difference, they said, "You must have been lucky." No, I did not become wealthy because of luck. I became wealthy because for 20 years, every time John and I faced a small financial decision, we usually chose opposite directions. One of us used money to look rich. The other used money to quietly become wealthy. And this is the part most broke people refuse to understand. They think wealth is mainly about salary. It is not. Wealth is first a matter of behavior. You can earn a huge income and still go bankrupt. You can also begin with an average salary and slowly build financial freedom. Because money does not care how intelligent you sound. It only reflects what you repeatedly do. Research on financial capability suggests that higher financial literacy can significantly reduce the risk of severe debt distress. But knowledge alone is not enough. Knowing what to do while refusing to do it still leaves you broke. This is the story of how two people with the same starting point ended up with completely different lives. Our first paychecks looked almost the same. After rent, food, transportation, and minimum debt payments, each of us had about $300 left. John used that money to finance a new smartphone. He said, "We have real jobs now. We should look successful." 3 months later, he upgraded his car. His old car still worked perfectly fine, but he said it no longer matched the image of someone who was moving up in life. I still remember the day he drove the new car to work. Everyone came outside to look at it. Some people complimented him. Some took pictures. John smiled all day. For a few hours, he felt rich. In exchange, he had signed himself up for years of payments. I kept my old phone. I kept my old car. And I set up an automatic transfer the day after every paycheck arrived. Every month, $200 went directly into an emergency fund and a broad index fund. I did not wait until the end of the month to see what was left, because I understood one very simple truth. If you save whatever remains after spending, nothing will remain. I saved first. Then I lived on the rest. During the first year, the difference between John and me looked almost meaningless. His phone was better. His car was better. His clothes were newer. His life looked more successful on social media. I looked completely ordinary, maybe even boring. But money always moves quietly. The most dangerous financial habits rarely destroy you overnight. And the most valuable habits rarely reward you overnight either. As our salaries increased, John's spending increased with them. A 10% raise led to a more expensive apartment. A year-end bonus led to a vacation paid for with credit. A promotion led to a new watch because he wanted to look the part. This is lifestyle inflation. It does not make you poor immediately. It simply guarantees that no matter how much more you earn, you will still feel short of money. Millions of people walk straight into this trap. They earn more, but they never keep more. They are not buying what they need. They are buying what makes them look like the class of people they want to belong to. Their coworker upgrades a car, so they feel pressured to upgrade too. Their friends post expensive vacations, so they feel like they must travel. A stranger shows off a luxury house online, and suddenly they hate their own home. So they borrow money from their future to buy approval in the present. That is not success. That is slavery with better lighting. I chose a different path. Every time my salary increased, I allowed my lifestyle to rise only slightly. The rest went into assets. Not because I hated enjoying life, but because I refused to trade 20 years of freedom for 20 minutes of admiration. I began to clearly separate assets from liabilities. An asset puts money in my pocket, grows in value, or helps me keep more money in the future. A liability continues taking money out of my pocket after I buy it. A luxury car might make me look wealthier, but insurance, maintenance, fuel, depreciation, and loan interest make me poorer every month. An index fund does not make strangers turn their heads, but it quietly buys back my future time. This is the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Being rich is what people can see. Being wealthy is what you have kept that people cannot see. Someone can drive a $100,000 car and still have a negative net worth. Someone else can wear a $20 shirt and own a multi-million-dollar portfolio. The world usually notices the first person. Time rewards the second. 4 years after we started working, our company announced layoffs. John lost his job. I lost mine too. Same day. Same shock. Same difficult job market. But from that moment on, our lives began moving in completely different directions. John had enough cash to survive for less than 3 weeks. Rent was still due. The car payment was still due. The credit card bill was still due. Then his car suddenly broke down. Because he had no emergency savings, he used a credit card to pay for the repair. Then he withdrew cash from another card to make the minimum payment on the first one. He was not solving the debt. He was moving the fire from one room to another. Some credit cards and consumer loans charge more than 20% a year. At that rate, money is no longer working for you. It is hunting you. Every morning, you wake up poorer than the day before, even if you did not buy anything. I was worried too, but I was not panicking. By then, I had built an emergency fund equal to about 6 months of essential expenses. I used it to cover rent, food, and necessary bills. I did not have to sell my investments while the market was down. I did not need a payday loan. I did not have to accept the first bad job offer just because I was desperate. My emergency fund did not make me rich. It prevented one bad event from sending me back to zero. And this is what many people fail to understand. Before you become wealthy, you must become difficult to destroy. You can have a brilliant investment strategy. You can predict the market correctly. You can own high-potential assets. But if one small emergency forces you to sell everything, your strategy is worthless. In finance, this is called room for error. I call it leaving yourself a way to survive. Life does not follow your spreadsheet. You can lose your job. A family member can get sick. Your car can break down. Your business can fail. The market can crash exactly when you need cash. Naive people plan as if nothing bad will happen. Adults understand that something bad will happen. They just do not know when. An emergency fund buys you time. Time to think. Time to search for a better job. Time to avoid making stupid decisions while panicking. And in finance, the ability to stay calm can be more valuable than the ability to earn high returns. 3 months later, I found a new job with a higher salary. John also found work. But he returned to the workforce with more debt, worse credit, and greater financial pressure. We experienced the same crisis. I used savings to absorb the shock. John used debt to postpone the shock. Debt never removes consequences. It only delivers them to your future with interest attached. John never looked at the total cost of a loan. He only looked at the monthly payment. A $40,000 car sounded too expensive. But when the salesperson said, "It is only $620 a month," the car suddenly felt affordable. This is the dangerous psychology of monthly payments. It takes a huge financial decision and shrinks it into one harmless-looking number. The seller does not want you to think about the total cost. They want you to think about today. They do not ask, "Would you like to pay $55,000 for this car after interest?" They ask, "Does $620 a month fit your budget?" John judged debt by the label. I judged it by the cost of capital. Before borrowing, I asked, "What is the real interest rate? What is the total amount I will repay? Will this asset produce income or continue draining money? Is the expected return higher than the borrowing cost? If everything goes wrong, can I still make the payments?" Debt itself is not automatically good or bad. It is a tool, but a tool in the hands of an ignorant person becomes a weapon against its owner. Consumer debt is usually used to buy things that lose value. New phones, luxury cars, vacations, furniture, clothes. You pay interest to own something that becomes less valuable over time. That is how poverty gets packaged as a premium lifestyle. Controlled debt is different. A business may borrow at a reasonable rate to buy equipment that generates revenue. An investor may use cautious leverage to acquire a cash-flowing asset. But calling a loan good debt does not magically make it good. If the profit exists only in your imagination, it is still bad debt. If you cannot survive the worst-case scenario, it is still gambling. If you borrow because you are afraid of missing out, you are not using leverage. Leverage is using you. When John finally admitted he was buried in debt, he started using the debt snowball method. He paid off the smallest balance first, regardless of interest rate. Every cleared account gave him motivation. This was not mathematically perfect, but psychologically, it worked for him. I also encouraged him to consider the debt avalanche method. List every debt. Pay the minimum on all of them. Put every extra dollar toward the debt with the highest interest rate. Once that debt is gone, move to the next highest rate. The snowball optimizes motivation. The avalanche optimizes total interest cost. The best method is not the one that sounds smartest. It is the one you are disciplined enough to finish. Do not spend 3 months arguing about methods while continuing to pay interest like an idiot. Pick one. Stop borrowing more. Attack the debt. Keep going until it is gone. In the early years, my investment portfolio grew painfully slowly. Some months I invested $200. Later, $300. Then, $500. As my income increased, my contributions increased too. But honestly, for many years, nothing dramatic happened. I did not double my money overnight. I did not discover a secret stock. I did not get rich from crypto. I simply kept buying assets consistently. When the market rose, I invested. When the market fell, I invested. Good news, I invested. Bad news, I still invested. I understood that my greatest advantage was not prediction. It was endurance. Compound growth looks weak in the beginning, so weak that most people underestimate it. That is because human beings think in straight lines. Compound growth moves in curves. Some long-term models suggest that $1 invested at a very young age can multiply many times over by retirement. The exact result depends on time, return, and assumptions. But the lesson remains the same. Money invested early has more time to reproduce than money invested late. Youth is not only a time for spending and experiences, it is one of the greatest financial assets you will ever own. And many people burn that asset on meaningless payments. John earned a lot of money over 20 years. At certain points, his salary was even higher than mine. But money passed through his hands like water through a broken bucket. Every time he cleared one payment, he created another. A newer car, a bigger house, new furniture, a more expensive vacation. He did not live like a poor person. He simply lived too close to financial collapse. By age 43, John was working harder than he had at 23, but his net worth had barely moved. Meanwhile, my portfolio eventually began growing by more each year than I was personally contributing. That was the moment compounding stopped being a boring concept and became a real machine. At first, I had to push the machine. Later, the machine started pulling me. From the outside, people called it overnight success. But that overnight took nearly 20 years. Warren Buffett did not become one of the world's wealthiest investors only because he was good at choosing companies. He had another advantage. Few people are patient enough to copy. He started early and continued for an extremely long time. Great wealth usually does not come from constantly doing spectacular things. It comes from refusing to destroy a good process. Do not panic sell. Do not go all in because of greed. Do not interrupt compounding to buy things that make you look important. Do not turn a small mistake into an irreversible disaster. Sometimes the strongest investment strategy is only 3 words. Shut up and wait. But people hate waiting. They want to act. They want to trade. They want to feel in control. They want a shortcut. And the market makes money from that impatience. You do not need to be right all the time to become wealthy. You need to avoid being wrong in a way that destroys you. When John and I sat down after 20 years, he asked, "What did you actually do, right?" I answered, "I did not do one perfect thing. I just tried not to repeat too many destructive things. I did not let my spending rise as fast as my income. I did not use debt to buy approval. I did not invest money I might need next month. I did not sell assets just because the market was panicking. I did not bet my entire future on one opportunity. I always left room for error. I lived below my means, not because I enjoyed suffering, but because the space between income and spending is where financial freedom is born. If you earn $10,000 and spend $10,500, you are getting poorer. If you earn $3,000 and keep and invest $800, you are getting wealthier. Salary shows your ability to earn. Net worth shows your ability to keep. Financial freedom shows your ability to control your life. First, control lifestyle inflation. The next time your income increases, do not immediately upgrade everything. Automatically increase your savings and investment rate first. You do not need to live miserably. But do not be stupid enough to use every extra dollar to buy a prettier cage. Second, build an emergency fund. Your first target can be 1 month of essential expenses, then increase it to 3 months. Eventually, aim for 3 to 6 months. Depending on your job stability and family situation, this money is not for a new phone. It is not for a vacation. It is not for buying the dip. It exists to stop a temporary problem from becoming a long-term disaster. Third, destroy bad debt. List every debt. Write down the balance, interest rate, and minimum payment. Choose the snowball if you need motivation. Choose the avalanche if you want to minimize interest. Then attack one debt at a time. Do not continue borrowing while trying to become debt-free. You cannot put out a fire while pouring gasoline with your other hand. Two people can earn the same salary, be the same age, carry the same debt, live in the same economy. But one person uses money to buy an image. The other uses money to buy assets. One prepares only for what they hope will happen. The other prepares for what could go wrong. One pays interest. The other earns it. One searches for a way to get rich quickly. The other builds a system that prevents them from becoming poor again. After 20 years, the distance between them looks enormous. But that distance was not created in one day. It was created by thousands of small choices. One unnecessary purchase avoided. 1 month of continued investing during a market decline. One decision not to borrow more. One moment of refusing to live for other people's approval. The difference between financial freedom and financial collapse is not printed on your paycheck. It exists at the line you choose every time money leaves your hands. And right now, you are already walking down one of these two paths. The question is not how much you earn. The real question is, after money passes through your hands, what remains? If this story made you rethink the way you use money, comment, "I choose assets," and send this video to someone who earns more but is always broke. Maybe they do not need a higher income. Maybe they just need a hard enough slap to wake up.